Boker Tov, Portland, Oregon. Good afternoon, Charleston, South Carolina, and Erev Tov to our friends in Talpiot. My name is Wayne Firestone. I'm the Executive Director of the America-Israel Friendship League. It's midday, midweek, and we're all trying to figure out how to get through the rest of the week with a little bit of support and friends. And as always, your friends here at America-Israel Friendship League bring you this webinar series, which we've been doing throughout the period of COVID. It's been a challenging period for all of us. We're in fall, and we're trying to come together in ways that we hadn't actually conceived of beforehand. And what a treat we have today with some professionals and friends and partners in and around the Atlanta community who are bringing us together a really important insight into our own mental health, how we cope, how we help one another, how we help other people who are hurting in this period of time. We are really lucky that our partners at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Israeli Consul General in Atlanta, as well as the Blue Dove Foundation, came together, put a lot of thought and preparation into today's episode, working with my colleague, Rabbi Eric Greenberg, who here is the director of our multi-faith cooperation initiative at the America-Israel Friendship League. We've been doing this with other consulates, but this is really the first time that we've decided to tackle head on the challenges that people are facing in the mental health realm. You know, from the very beginning when we started this webinar series, we had in mind to support one another, to be friends to one another, because that's what you do during hard period. But we wanted to bring you resources that really could matter. So let us know in the chat where you're calling in from. If you're on Facebook, please send a watch party to your friends so other people can tap in, perhaps during their lunch hour, perhaps breathe deeply today, and know that there are other people that are, you know, struggling and having challenges as well, but there is support out there, and we're just absolutely thrilled to bring this series to you. So Rabbi Greenberg, please, we've got a robust panel. We've got really a lot we want to try to cover today, and I turn over to you now. We will obviously be taking questions and comments throughout and hope to get to as many of those as we can over the course of the hour.
Well, thank you very much, Wayne. It's now my honor to introduce Israel's Consul General in Atlanta, Anat Sultan Dadan, for welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you all for joining us today. We are honored to have the opportunity to partner with the American-Israel Friendship League on this important topic of mental health at this time. Over the past year, as we are experiencing a global pandemic, we have all witnessed the impact of COVID-19 in the United States, in Israel, and across the world. Millions have been affected in different ways. Alongside those who have been sick and those who have sadly lost their lives, the financial, social, and emotional toll has affected countless more. During such challenging times, we are seeing rising levels of mental health concerns. Community plays a crucial role, and the role of our faith leadership is more crucial than ever in providing community support and unity. In today's conversation, we will be able to hear from our incredible panelists about the different ways in which mental health can be addressed in the community and the important role that faith leaders can play in supporting their communities at this time of hardship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Consul General, and welcome again to everyone who's watching on Zoom and Facebook. So with the notable leaders we have with us today, I think it's best to jump right in. In the United States, almost half of adults will experience a mental health illness during their lifetime. And people of all faiths and none are struggling with mental health issues, including depression, isolation, addiction, trauma. But the situation has dramatically worsened with the raging coronavirus. How bad is it? And what can we do about it? Today, we will hear how religion and mental health experts are employing their faith traditions to address the unprecedented challenges being posed by this pandemic. I'm privileged today to welcome our panel of esteemed faith and community leaders to what promises to be an enlightening and inspiring discussion. Here is some background on each of them. First is the Reverend Dr. Dominique A. Robinson, who serves as the inaugural Dean of Chapel and Assistant Professor of Religion at Wiley College in Marshall, Texas. She earned a BA in Government and Psychology from Georgetown University, a Master of Divinity and a Master of Theology, both from the Candler School of Theology at Emory University and the Doctor of Ministry degree in Gospel and Culture from Columbia Theological Seminary. Dr. Robinson has preached across the United States and abroad in Guyana, South America, Barbados, Haiti, and Trinidad. It's her life's goal to fuse her doctrine, discipline, and testimony to be an effective advocate and ally for those who are most marginalized. Next, we have Dr. Tal Bergman, who is the head of mental health services at the Ministry of Health in Israel. For years, Dr. Bergman has been dealing with the advancement of research and education in the fields of psychiatry, ethics, and law. She served as CEO of the Israel Psychiatric Association, where she helped advance public policy to reduce the stigma and to advance the field.
Well, it looks like Rabbi Greenberg's feed got caught up there. So why don't we just begin with our panelists until we reestablish contact and hear from each of you. Dr. Bergman, maybe you want to start? I've got you on the screen.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And I think it's a very strong seminar. I mean, the topics are very strong. They're highly important, and it's very interesting for me to be here and to really be educating myself and to be learning from other people from all around the States. I'll say, I'll present in a couple of minutes because Rabbi Eric has sent me the priority. The questions. Okay. I'll give you just a brief about the Israeli mental health services and about the population here. Well, first of all, Israel, as you all know, is a very small country, and we are very much community oriented. I mean, we're very small, and there are, of course, subpopulations inside the country. But basically speaking, we're very familiar, we are very much community oriented. Now in 2015, Israel has passed through a very big reform in mental health, and it was a very big issue since up to then the mentally ill were treated by, the insurer was actually the state, and all the rest of the health was actually being done by the HMOs, what you would consider HMOs. It's a kind of bit of a different structures in Israel. It's called sick funds, but it's like HMOs. So the responsibility for mental health was actually transferred with all the budgets from the state as an insurer to the HMOs, creating thus the opportunity for an integrative approach between the mind and the body, and thus actually promoting and creating a better space for mental health to be, to step forward to the, let's say, to the central arena of public opinion. So that created a situation in which people actually were getting more and more involved in public mental health. And when I started my position back in 2014, the phones that I got from people and the personal stories were just, do you know someone private very good that I can reach, you know, to get my, to have my therapy, do you know a good therapist, a good psychiatrist? And the phone calls I've been getting in the last couple of years are, do you know someone good from the public sector that I could go to and really receive a very good treatment, and you know, it's funded in Israel. It's free for everyone now, so it's funded by the country. It's not paying for the service, and so things have changed. So to give a strong orientation to what was happening before the COVID-19 in terms of mental health, there's a lot to be done, because there's, of course, there's a lot of things to improve, but the actual system has grown. There are a lot of much more positions. There are much more eclectic services for people, and of course, much more professionalism inside the domain of the services. And I think that also the stigma had reduced, and we see that in the increased demand that people for the mental health services. We have waiting lists for those professionals, which we didn't have at the beginning. So I would say there's a different new approach towards mental health. And of course, and this is the subject of this whole very special webinar, that the COVID-19 is actually, let's say, it has emphasized the importance of mental health for the whole Israeli public.
Great, thank you. Hopefully this will remain stable. Allow me to introduce the rest of our panelists. Daiki Marcus Barlow is a monk ordained in Japanese Zen Buddhism. He has been practicing Zen Buddhism for 26 years. In 2010, he took full vows and was ordained as a Buddhist priest. Previously, he worked in public accounting and banking before he retired to work full-time as a Buddhist minister. He graduated from the University of Florida with a master's degree in accounting. And batting cleanup is Cantor Beth Schaefer, who became the Bunzel Family Cantorial Chair of Temple Sinai in Sandy Springs, Atlanta in 2015, after almost 20 years serving congregations in Central Florida. Her education and clinical training are reflected in a diverse portfolio of responsibilities, both pastoral and musical. She has enjoyed a dual career for 23 years, both as a cantor and as a composer and performer of contemporary Jewish music. Her works are widely used throughout the Reform movement in North America. So let's pick it up with Dr. Robinson to talk for a few minutes about her religious tradition and its approach towards mental health, followed by Cantor Schaefer, Daiki, and Daiki.
Good morning, everyone. As we've shared earlier, my name is Dominique Robinson. I was reared in a traditional Pentecostal upbringing, and then I became ordained in the Black Methodist tradition, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. I'm currently serving as the Dean of Chapel at Wiley College, which is a United Methodist institution. From my perspective, the ways in which I approach mental health, I cannot separate mental health from spiritual well-being, particularly as I am considering my population of people of color. We are complex individuals, and we see faith, the language I use is as a coping mechanism, a way in which we can connect to a community and to a higher being in order to navigate the ills of society we find ourselves in. And so I find myself rooted in the creation story as I look at mental health. I see that God created the heavens and the earth and all of the world. And the scripture says that on the seventh day, God rested. I'm just one who believes God didn't need all day to create everything that God created each day. I believe that God created some things and then rested the rest of that day until the next day where God decided to create something new. And so from my perspective, I find that we, in order to maintain our mental health and our spiritual well-being, we have to learn to function from a place of rest and a place of Sabbath that has to become a part of our everyday routine multiple times a day. There are some people who talk about the nap ministry. And so I believe that as we continue to navigate these waters of not just a double pandemic, but a quadruple pandemic where people are suffering in various aspects of their lives, that we have to find places of rest, of respite, of joy as resistance to survive in this particular time. And so I'm going to share that for this moment, and we will continue in our rich conversation.
Great, thank you. Daiki, could you share with us?
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here again. And so I guess from my point of view as a Buddhist practitioner, you might have heard there's a phrase that Buddhism is actually a type of ancient psychology. So Buddhism is more than that, but it's very true that the Buddha's mission or his purpose in life was to seek a way to relieve suffering in his own life and to teach other people how to relieve suffering in their life. And so the Buddha's kind of point was that he discovered that most suffering was largely created in our own minds. So his teaching was different ways to approach our concepts and thought creations and patterns to help us have a more tranquil, fruitful life and be more in unison or be completely in unison with each other and the universe. So it's through this sense of, according to Buddhist teachings, this sense of separation from each other and from the universe and from the greater bounty of the universe and life, and that causes us to be trapped in our own corners and not be able to approach a more complete happiness and embrace all the wonderful aspects of life and the universe we're in. So, and for myself and for many people, I would call many people that practice in the West and Europe kind of like Western convert Buddhists. So in Asia, most people are born into Buddhist religion, and maybe it's just something the family does or the community does to mark certain events during the year, and maybe and also to help during periods of transition, as particularly death and funerals. But when Buddhism came to the West, it came in as a Buddhist, as a psychological teaching. And most Westerners, I guess Buddhism you would say, became more popular in the West in the 1960s, when people were kind of exploring different aspects of the mind and different ways of looking at their lives and society. And so in the West, I would say 99% of the people that we would say practice with, that live a Buddhist life and practice with other Buddhists, we all have come to Buddhism through always generally through a sense of psychological suffering. Maybe people are experiencing anxiety, depression, all of these things that we're working with. So people generally come to Buddhism in the West looking for some relief from their mental health issues, or trying to approach better mental health hygiene. So the one thing that most people come into Buddhism for is this, to practice meditation. So oftentimes people will come in wanting to learn how to meditate. And when I first started, meditation was not very widespread throughout society. So people sought out, Buddhist or meditative traditions. It wasn't like offered or secularly in society. So people would come in looking to learn to meditate, looking to have some mental clarity in their lives. And so they may officially become a practicing Buddhist, or they may just come and meditate with a Buddhist group for their whole entire experience with Buddhist meditation. So we're not necessarily a religion where people have to join. We welcome people just to come and sit and practice with us, and develop whatever level of mental clarity that they're capable of, and devote as much time as they are willing to. So people don't have to come and shave their head and make a profession of some type of philosophy, denominational affiliation. So I think that Buddhism has a special place to address these topics, because it really is the basic focus of our faith tradition, is to work with our minds. So we have a saying in our tradition to study the self. It's the first thing you do, study yourself. And then you, by studying yourself, you forget yourself, or you are able to loosen your grip on your limited identity that exists just in yourself. So you study the self, then you transcend the self, and once you transcend the self, you're able to go on in enlightenment forever. Great. It's enlightenment. So that's kind of, I think, where Buddhism has a special thing to say about mental health from a practical standpoint, and then from a religious standpoint.
Thank you, Doug. Very, very, very enlightening. Cantor Beth, can you share from your perspective?
I'm happy to. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, or good morning, depending on where you reside. I'm going to ride a little bit on what Dr. Bergman offered as far as how Israel approaches mental health, and of course in my congregation and in many Jewish congregations, I think the the engine that moves the mental health aspects of our lives is community. As a religion, prayer happens in community. Life cycle events happen in community. So we are a faith tradition that relies very heavily on the relationships that we build as a community, especially as we approach this time of pandemic. It couldn't be more important that in good times we have built a strong community, so that in challenging times we can rely on that infrastructure to help our congregants individually or as families. I think as far as faith tradition goes, we can't cure mental illness. That's not our job as faith leaders. Our job is to accompany our community members on their journeys. And so while we can't cure, because medicine is what we know, or professional counseling or other things in that realm, are more parts of a cure, what we can do as a community is participate in healing. And what is healing? Both from a spiritual and non-spiritual standpoint, it's we're here to help to encourage strength and to provide sources of strength, to provide sources of faith, to provide sources of positive self-identity. As a congregation and as a faith leader, I find my job is to be that spiritual accompanist. I'm a musician, so I know you can see that, right? To be the accompanist for the person in their life. There are many sources throughout our sacred texts that talk about both the presence of mental illness. We have plenty of examples in Torah and Talmud of people who are experiencing real trauma and which is coming into fruition in their actions. And we also have texts that speak to what some of the mitigating actions that we can take as faith leaders to help our communities and our individuals in need. But I would find, by and large, especially during this time of isolation, trying to reassure our members that their community still exists, and that it is something that is real and can still be tapped into despite the physical separation, that our emotional and spiritual connection is still strong and viable and helpful. I find that is the best thing we can offer at this time, during this specific time. I know we may speak to greater issues beyond this time of pandemic, but I feel that especially now, where we are all of us, including those of us who lead, are all feeling the weight of this particularly challenging and extraordinary time, to be able to rely on one another, both the clerical leaders, the lay leaders, and the various committees and people who we are used to doing our social action work with, and our prayer work with, and our educational endeavors with, to be able to rely on those community members to help navigate this difficult time and be agents of healing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's wonderful foundation for the next part of our interactive aspect of our webinar, which is what is as a result of great. I think it's great for everybody to share. We can start with Dr. Robinson and talk about, from your own point of view, what you are seeing in terms of in your community and what you're dealing with. And it would be great for everybody to chime in with their own, personal story.
Awesome. Thank you. So,
Dominique? Great.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So I share with you all that I am currently serving as the Dean of Chapel at Wiley College, which is an HBCU, Historical Black College and University. Again, I share with you that I'm coming from a perspective of people of color, particularly Black people. Right now, we are seeing a tremendous rise in anxiety, depression, domestic violence, home insecurity, unemployment, several issues that are playing a role in people's, so to speak, well-being. And coming from the people of color perspective, we have already experienced racism and not feeling at home, but we now are seeing blatant racism. I believe that technology and social media has changed what I call access to it. I don't believe that racism ever went away. I don't ever believe there was a post-racial society. I think that with social media and technology, we now see it easier and faster than we used to. I am a New Jersey native. I did not find out about a lynching in Mississippi or something that occurred in Mississippi until, back in the day when it came through a newspaper or a report. But now you can see live telephone footage of things that occur. And so I believe that there is an intrinsic and a generational rage and fear that I am finding in younger Black persons. And that's causing a lot of just anxiety and angst about living in society, along with all of the other elements. My people are also the people who are disproportionately experiencing the effects of COVID-19 without having proper access to healthcare and support in those ways. And so my experience has been fighting on the front lines and the back lines. I have spent some time in Louisville, Kentucky. I've spent some time in DC. I've been at protests and on the front lines and being in places to make sure people are getting the resources that they need, living in food deserts without public transportation, not being able to get to a hospital when they're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, being sent back home because we just think it might be an asthma effect or something to that apparent. So I'm dealing with a people and a population who have issues and concerns from every facet of life and already feel like they're at the bottom of the totem pole, gaining access and support. How does faith play a role in that? Obviously, coming from the traditional Black church preaching experience, we want to always offer hope. But the truth of the matter is we have a cumulative and a collective trauma that we are truly dealing with. And I believe that on the other side of COVID, because coming from the Black church tradition, I have to have hope. There's another side on the other side of COVID that indeed we will probably need a moment to do some public lamenting. And just being able to pause and cry and like the book of Lamentations, just being able to be there because we have not been able to even celebrate the loss of lives the way we were accustomed to together. And so there's been so much that's lost, but I want to offer hope even in it, that even in the midst of this famine we find ourselves in, God is still providing food. Even in the midst of this drought, God is still sending rain. No pun intended for those who are living in like the Gulf area where this tropical storm is coming through, but that God is still a provider. But we have to be really honest. And we cannot super spiritualize where people are emotionally and mentally, where we believe in highlighting and emphasizing finding a therapist, talking to somebody, saying it's okay to not be okay, finding ways to establish new routines with all of us working from home, being able to articulate even in fear when the home isn't a safe space, and being able to just be present. And so finding ways to establish community and offer resources in a non-traditional sense. And so that's been my experience. In some ways, it's quite aggressive. And in other ways, you almost have to lay back and be quiet until you can offer the support that's most needed. And so it's been a very complex season in trying to offer students support who are working remotely and learning remotely, who had to take on the responsibility of getting a job and supporting the household, as well as supporting faculty and staff who are like, I didn't sign up to teach online either. And so realizing that everybody is going through something, and how can we be an example of Jesus Christ, offering radical love and hospitality to each and every one of us, seeing the humanity in all of us.
Yeah, great. That raises Dr. Bergman. How is this playing out in Israel? You're dealing with all kinds of populations. Based on what Dr. Robinson is saying, what's the Israeli viewpoint here?
Well, first of all, I would say that basically in all of Israel, we had surveys, and as my colleague said, there is 42% of the population here, they report an increase in stress and depression and anxiety. And this is, if you think about 42%, it's about 2.4 million people from the whole population of Israel. And of course, in Israel, there are a lot of subgroups. So I would say yes. I think the things that have been mentioned here, they happen. I think they happen in Israel. I think they happen everywhere. The depression, the anxiety, the increase in violence, in familial violence. There's also an increase in drug use all over the country, and also all over most of the countries in the world. It has been thoroughly demonstrated in research that we see right now. And let's just speak about really subpopulations. And I will take, for an example, the what's called the Haredic Jews, like the ultra-Orthodox or the Orthodox Jewish people of Israel. So they live in their own communities, mostly in Jerusalem and a lot of places, but let's say most of them in Bnei Brak in Jerusalem. Now, this is a very, very close society. And they have, on average, more children than the rest of the families in Israel, and they're very much used to their own ways of life, and they usually also live in very small apartments, okay? Like they don't have a lot of meters around, so everything is being strongly emphasized. So besides the stress and the depression and anxiety and all the things that have been mentioned here, unfortunately, some of the parts of the Israeli society actually blames the Orthodox people of Israel in increasing the sickness rates and COVID-19. And so this society basically suffers from two other elements that we have to consider. First of all, they do feel that they are being blamed. So besides the stress, depression, and from all the other reasons, because of their inability to work and the inability to go to a synagogue, which is something very basic in their ways of life. And for someone Orthodox not to be able to participate in prayers inside the synagogue, it's something that they do as a community, the synagogue. It's very different than praying from your own home in the very small space of yourself. So these two elements create a different kind of anxiety that relates to the fear of losing their community structure and their ways of living. And this is actually, it's a very difficult dilemma for us in the Ministry of Health, because you really want to help, you really want to do things in terms of mental health. Like we offer, for all the Israelis, we now offer 3 sessions, psychotherapeutical sessions free of charge, through the phone for everyone that needs that. And we do offer a lot of things by using technology. But Haredic people in Israel, they don't use technology. I mean, in their houses and their large families, not everyone has a cellular phone and not even a computer or an iPad or things that we, for all of us, we consider this to be, our way of life. So there are a lot of obstacles when we want to create a mental health service or even hope that was mentioned here for this population, because they're very close and they're very used to communicating in the synagogues and through the synagogues. And so these are true dilemmas that we're trying to work with, but I would, honestly say that it's very, very challenging.
Thank you. Becky, you had shared in a very, to me, touching, interesting effect on your group of students and praying. I wonder if you could share that, the effect of the pandemic on the isolation.
Yeah, thank you. And kind of tying into what Dr. Bergman was saying a little bit. In Buddhism, we have the congregation is considered one of our treasures. It is a refuge for us. And up until the pandemic, there was kind of a general feeling that meeting remotely over the internet to practice meditation was not an acceptable thing to do, except in situations where people were not able to meet physically with people. So that was taken away from us right away. And so it would seem like that sitting together in silent meditation physically wouldn't be that important, but actually it really, really is very important. So just the presence and the closeness that builds up around people when you're sitting together, the physicality that comes out of it, and then being able to share things you might have experienced during the meditation period right away, right in that context, is just very important. So we were faced with not having that right away. And then also we tend to not do a lot of talking when we're meeting as a meditation group. That might be obvious. So that was taken, the ability to meet physically in our synagogue, in a sense, sitting together, was taken away from us too. And so we had all of a sudden this feeling that we all wanted to meet together and talk, which I never experienced that before. So I started a study group where we do read some religious texts, but then that also gives us the opportunity to talk about how we're feeling, and then take whatever text we're reading and relate it to our lives. So it's been a really wonderful experience for us to be able to take the teachings that come in our tradition and reflect those on the times we're going through now and how we deal with them. And then being able to talk to each other. And so it's been a really interesting experience, but I still feel that it's much better to meet in person, meditate. But then this separation has allowed us to, and the kind of intense suffering of this period has allowed us to kind of break open and share things with each other where we did not so much in the past. So it's been a growth experience.
Yeah, an unintended consequence. Cantor Beth, you also had some personal relevant experiences recently. I wonder if you could share those.
I'm happy to. I think one of the common disappointments and frustrations and experiences that many in the Jewish community are experiencing are the disappointment of life cycle events not being able to play out the way they normally would, whether it's bar mitzvahs where a kid has been practicing for a whole year and has gotten up the courage to stand up at a pulpit and be able to, show his or her community what they're able to do. And of course, now they just have their immediate relatives in the congregation in a room that could seat 350 people. We allow 20 people. And so many of those B'nai Mitzvah were canceled altogether, postponed altogether in the spring, and now we're bringing them back here in the fall. Weddings that have been postponed over and over again. People who have been coached to turn their apartment into the wedding chuppah, the canopy under which they would get married, and figure out how to get married under those circumstances. And I think the most heartbreaking have been the deaths. Whether because of COVID or some other illness, not being able to gather and hug and support those who are suffering loss. It has made us really have to double down on using technology, on coaching our older people on how to use technology. We've done some pairing where we've had congregants let us know if they are technologically savvy and would make themselves available to coach someone. Our teens who are the most technologically savvy have also come forward as possible technology coaches for different people in our congregation. I myself, my mother passed away 2 months ago, and we had 9 people at a funeral and a Zoom service to go through the mourning process. I was able to have 9 people join me in my backyard, spread out to have an in-person prayer service, and we've done that for others where we've had driveway services to bring community the best we can to people who are in need. I think that the loss of the thing, not even the loss of the person, but the loss of the communal experience. I know for me, I found it very challenging, I have to say. And I got hundreds of messages and cards in the mail, and yet still that my most visceral craving was to be in the presence of another person. And so as we approached our high holidays, for example, which had just passed a few weeks ago, which our services did not happen in person, how could we make that connection? We actually hand-delivered the prayer book to every family in our congregation. So everyone got a visit from someone in the congregation. 1,600 deliveries were made in the course of a couple of weeks. We're just trying to hang on to the threads of our web that keep us sane and keep us knowing that someone else cares and is thinking about us and is supporting us. Also to add on to Dr. Robinson, to give that essence of hope to people who are in a state of hopelessness, I think is the things that we're trying to lean into in every way we can.
Great, thank you so much, Beth. Which leads to here we are, representatives of different faiths. What do you think, and also a government official who has seen this from that viewpoint? What is the dream here of how community and faith leaders, faith organizations can come together and change the stigma around mental health? I think that's a key here, and we could start with Dr. Bergman, who has that larger viewpoint.
Well, how can we reduce the stigma of mental health? I think the key here, from my perspective, after doing this job for 6 years, is I think the main thing is to encourage people who have mental health issues or disorders to give them the safety that they need in order to not to be embarrassed and to be, in a certain way, to be exposed. I have found that when I'm engaging people with mental disorder or mental disability who are willing to come and to share with others everything that they're going through, and they are demonstrating to the world that we're basically, there are people like us, they have this problem, and people do have many other problems. This is something that promotes mental health and reduces the stigma by far more than any other interventions. And so I think that religious leaders and spiritual leaders, their ability, I think their position and their contribution should be in creating this space for those who have mental disorders, to create the space for them to feel safe enough to be transparent, to live their lives as they should, to be proud of who they are without any embarrassment. Because you are the leaders, you are the back. We are the professionals. We can provide things up to a certain point, and we can demonstrate a lot of things from the professional point of view, but from the social point of view, I think that opinion leaders have a very, very vast contribution to this.
Yeah. So Dr. Robinson and the rest, how can faith leaders work more effectively with each other, cooperate on this issue, as well as perhaps getting government involved in a joint cooperative effort on this question?
One of the things that I've done here at Wiley College, particularly for the month of October, being Mental Health Awareness Week was in the middle of that month, is literally every single chapel experience has a wellness moment that shares on the different aspects or different mental illnesses. So we've talked and we offer resources every single worship experience. You cannot have a worship experience without receiving some sort of information. As a matter of fact, as we are planning chapel for next week, we're bringing up the No Shave November kind of piece and component, but we have nurses and psychiatrists and psychologists who give us a good 3 to 5 minute kind of snippet about information. So I believe it's about educating people. It's about making sure they are aware. It's about resourcing people. In order to destigmatize it, we have to be really clear that the truth is the majority of us are on the spectrum or have some sort of mental and emotional distress or disorder if we are really honest with ourselves. And then in the middle of this pandemic, truly our anxiety and other issues have become more prevalent, and the need to be able to speak to a therapist and a counselor is at an all-time high in the absolute, it's a necessity for living life. And so I believe that we have to stop demonizing it is the language I would say. We have to stop demonizing a mental illness. You are not, you don't have demons, you are not legion. If you have some sort of mental or emotional distress, you are a normal human being who is seeking to navigate life, and there's a community that is here for you and loves you and supports you. And I think that particularly now, in light of us having this conversation, after hearing the news about an individual who was just shot and killed in Philadelphia, who had a mental illness, we have to learn to be more sensitive and understanding and see a person for what's actually happening. We cannot, the fact that we are living such fear that we move to kill instead of to help is problematic. And that's a systemic issue in society, which I don't want to say is rooted in racism, but we certainly find it happening a little bit more for people of color. And so I think that we have to start being honest with this conversation. What are we seeing? What are we experiencing? And why do we go right into a place of harming people instead of helping people? So I think faith leaders have to take it upon themselves to live out the mandate to help destigmatize and start learning, teaching people what it means to function in compassion. I saw the question talked about police. I'm not talking about defunding police. I'm talking about demilitarizing police so that we can start having a better society where we are really being protected and served in such a way that we don't have to have the conversations about who was killed without, people shouldn't be killed, period, at any point blank for no reason at all. And so what happens when we start teaching people how to function with compassion? It's my hope that being in the midst of this pandemic, we start seeing each other and having humanity and learning we've been in a place where we had to be around our family members and be in people who probably aren't happy in their marriages and relationships, have been stuck at home. So you start to reevaluate some things. So hopefully we've got to a place where we start to prioritize people for who we are and see each other in each other despite color, ethnicity, religion, where you've come from. I'm hoping that that's where we get to.
Great. Wow. Cantor Beth, is there a way that we can get leaders like yourselves to cooperate together as Dr. Robinson and Dr. Bergman have been saying, to cooperate more, because we do need the unity will help lift this issue into greater consciousness.
I am fortunate enough to be active in the Sandy Springs Interfaith Clergy Association where I live. And we're a very active group with lots of longstanding members who have been faith leaders in our area for a long time. And we are constantly working on the issues that affect the greater community beyond our faith traditions, whether it be racism, food insecurity, economic disparagement, and inequality. We are constantly trying to be the face that shows up at city council meetings, to be the ones who support initiatives that shine a light on the ills of our society and how we as faith leaders can be the cheerleaders for what is the right and good thing to be and to do. I think that one of the things that we do, especially during this time, is partnering with agencies that have wellness initiatives run by mental health professionals, bringing those people into our midst, either to do kind of a one and done teaching for our community, or to do a series of offerings to help people who need more than us, that we as faith leaders are qualified to offer, to be the touch point or the connector to larger resources. And also, as part of our regular experience, in-house experience, to know that healing is something that someone is always in need of healing. And so to make sure that prayers for healing, prayers for coping, prayers for hope are a regular part of our worship experience helps destigmatize, right? Because we're not directing it at one person, we're directing it at an entire community, knowing that we're casting a wide net and going to be able to affect as many people as possible. But I think partnering, finding those faith leaders who are your neighbors, and finding the common ground that can unite you in the sacred work of what faith communities do is imperative. I mean, politics is local, and so is faith, right? I mean, the church down the street, you need to know who goes to that church, who leads that church, and what they're doing, what they're saying, and so that you can add your voice to the chorus and sing the songs that the entire community needs to hear.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. The Buddhist perspective can be brought here in a multi-faith way. What do you think about what the Cantor Beth just said, and how you can bring that in?
I think that in America, at least, that we're so concerned about our public face and having it all together and having the things that are required to have that look of success and accomplishment. But for when things go wrong, or when people are broken or hurting, that's where we want them to show up. For us, for me, I think that in the Buddhist perspective, that's where we can begin to work. If you're feeling depression or anxiety, that's where we can jump in. And I think that's true for spiritual traditions, and in a society that's hopefully growing more aware of mental health issues. We have to have our doors and hearts open for people to come in and look for ways to connect in this process of being more open about mental health issues.
Thank you. Wow. Well, we're coming up to the end of the hour. I want to give a big thanks to all our panelists. Just inspiring, and I think this is something that needs to be replicated around the country. People talking and coming together with both their faith perspectives and from their professional, like Dr. Bergman, and working together to deal with these issues. I'd also like to thank special thanks to our partners, the Council General of Israel and the Foreign Ministry, and Gabby Leon-Spat, who's the executive director of the Atlanta-based Blue Dove Foundation, which was created to help address the issues of mental illness and addiction in the Jewish community and beyond. Very helpful. For more information about her, go to thebluedovefoundation.org. Now I'd like to turn this back to our host, the executive director of AIFL, Wayne Firestone, for some closing information.
Well, first of all, thanks to all the panelists. I've been reflecting on all of your comments and the spirit of your presentations. We're living through really challenging moments on multiple fronts, and as you all said, then on top of that, we've essentially bottled everyone up in their houses, and for those few that come out, when you do come outside, the stigma of even talking about this issue becomes for some an overwhelming burden, and for others actually a physical threat. So your willingness to engage in this discussion as faith leaders, as government officials, as people of good conscience is really incredible. And what we've seen at the America-Israel Friendship League is that sometimes, you know, the fact that you're in quarantine as Israelis have been up until recently during the high holiday period that Dr. Bergman referred to, or that it's different in different parts of our country here in the United States, and it's gone on a roller coaster, that's obviously contributed as well to the inability to even, you know, have a friend over your home or have a meal together, let alone to go meditate with a group of people or to attend a shiva or a funeral activity. But I think what you all shared today is exactly the kind of thing that we've been hoping to promote through our series. And it's really what friends can do. And we're having to, in a sense, reinvent friendship in the era of Zoom and what will come after this, because we know it will be a blended environment where sometimes we are going to be able to go out and congregate, or we're going to be able to congregate in smaller units. But if you need the help and support of others and to know that there are other people around you, sometimes to talk about the issues and sometimes just as a distraction. And for those of you, and I see many familiar names and places, we have people who have called in today from nearby me in Falls Church, Virginia, people in Minneapolis, San Diego, Toledo, Ohio, Brazil, people from all over who I think have recognized both in the welcoming comments as well as the chat that's occurred during the discussion today that you need friendship. You need people who are like you and very different from you. You need to hear exactly what Dr. Robinson said: rest, respite, and joy. And so we need to come together around the difficult issues, the joyous issues, together to make some sense out of this period of time. For those of you that have been with our webinar series now over these past 7 or 8 months since March, you know that we've been connecting people together around different topics. This Sunday, we're going to connect together 2 bakers. So if you can't find any joy in baking, we hope to, even for the novices among you, to find something that you can enjoy doing from your own homes. It is actually, I was informed, National Chocolate Day today, so that's also potentially an upper for all of us, as long as it's within moderation. And so we're hoping that you will come back and enjoy this. We are asking, we're at the very last few days at the end, through the end of October, of a very generous donor who has agreed to match all of our, and he himself is a medical doctor, Dr. David Milch. It's the Milch Match. Every single shekel and every single dollar that we're bringing in small amounts to support our activities are being matched by this foundation. So we encourage you to continue to come back Wednesdays and Sundays for our episodes. We encourage you to contribute what you can. And very soon we will continue our tradition of celebrating an annual Partners for Democracy celebration, which normally we hold as a physical dinner in New York each year to present our awards. This year we can't do it, so we've done what we can to be inventive and innovative, and we're holding a virtual event. So you can read about that on the website and our social media that was just flashed for you. It's going to be this year, because we can do it at the King David in Jerusalem for the first time. So we're excited to share that with you. We hope everyone will look and participate and help in whatever ways we can. To all the panelists today, to all our partners, to the Consul General in Atlanta, the Blue Dove Foundation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, thanks for making this webinar happen today. We look forward to many more in the future. Everyone have a healthy week, and we look forward to being together again in the future.